Hello everyone, in today's video we would be discussing how to play the Ponziani opening with the white pieces. It is a very interesting opening, and if your opponent doesn't know how to react to it, you are simply going to get a winning position. And in this video, Ponziani opening, it is going to be a complete repertoire. So this one video is going to be enough for you guys to learn the complete Ponziani opening. So I don't want to waste any further time, so let's start. So we are playing with the white pieces and we start the game with 1 e4. Our opponent plays e5, knight f3, knight to c6. And it looks like a very standard opening. If we play the move bishop to c4, we have the Italian. We can also go for the standard bishop to b5. But we are going to play the move c3 on the third move. And from here, the Ponziani opening begins. After c3, black is usually having 4 ways to continue the position: knight to f6, g5, bishop to c5, or even f5. In this video, we are going to cover every particular method except d5 because it is a bit lengthy. We are going to discuss this particular variation in the next chapter. Everything else we are going to cover today. Starting with the sidelines. If black plays f5, the idea is to expand on the king side, and once black castle is short, black would be having an open f5, which is good for black. So after f5, we are going to strike in the center by playing the move d4. So after d4, black is having 3 ways. Black can play knight f6, capture the pawn on e4, or even capture the pawn on d4. If black plays knight to f6 first, we capture the pawn on f5. Black have to push the pawn, or else I don't really see a way for black to play knight f6 and not push the pawn. If you take, I can happily capture the pawn back with the knight, and white is already pretty happy. So e4, the only way. Knight to e5, d6. Obviously you can't take because white would be completely winning then. So d6, attacking the knight, and at the same time attacking the f5 pawn. So first we trade off the knight, and now we play the move g4, protecting the f5 pawn. Black would like to undermine the g4 pawn, or else we are going to be simply better after g4. So h5 and already g5. Knight g5, c4, attacking the knight. And knight to b6. And now what is the whole idea? We play the move f6 in this position, a very interesting move. We allow our opponent to capture the pawn, or else we are already better. We are already having many ways to push the pawn or even capture the pawn. So take, and now we play the move bishop to e2. After bishop e2, our idea here is we want to capture the h5 pawn, basically breaking the black's king castling rights, and now white would be having already a very comfortable position. So that's the whole idea of white, and white is already comfortable. So that's exactly what happens if black plays knight to f6. If black plays e into d4, we are going to push the pawn to e5. What's the idea? The idea of e5 is to grab more space in the center. After e5, black is having 2 main moves, and after e5, you can notice that black is also not having the f6 square available for the knight. So after e5, black is having 2 moves. Black can either go for capturing the pawn on c3, or black can even go for playing the move d6. If d into c3, we capture the pawn back. We are pawn down, but black have to play d6, or else black is not really having any good move. So d6, and now already bishop to c4. Taking away the light squares, takes. Now black's idea is to simply trade off the queen. So we play the move queen b3, keeping the queens on the board, and now you can already sense how white is having a huge amount of lead in development compared to black's weak king. Knight to f6, and already a check. Or else there are no good moves to protect check. Like, I don't know, maybe queen e7, but simply the knight is hanging. So you don't really have an option but to move your knight, allow this check, king e7, and already bishop e3. Rook d1 is coming up, bishop c5 check is coming up, and the game is over for black. So that's the whole idea if black goes for capturing the c3 pawn. If d6, we can play the move bishop to b5, pinning up the knight. The whole point here is, after d5, we capture the pawn with the knight, as the knight is already pinned on c6. So queen d5, attacking the knight and the bishop, the best move. We capture the knight, pawn takes, and now we simply short castle. And after short castle, white's already better, because first you cannot capture the knight because you will simply lose your queen. So after maybe knight f6, still rook e1, and white is already having a very comfortable position. If you go for capturing the pawn, I can already play queen a4, keeping the queens on the board. And if you go for capturing another pawn, bishop b2, knight c3 is coming up, rook d1, black is totally lost. So this is how you can easily continue playing if your opponent goes for capturing the e into d4. If your opponent goes for capturing the e4 pawn, we capture the pawn on e5. And here black's having to move either knight into e5 or knight to f6. If knight into e5, we capture the knight. d5, justifying the move of capturing the knight and basically solidifying the pawn structure, or else white is going to be very happy as black can't really develop his knight either, and white doesn't really have any good problems because the knight g1 has already been developed. So d5 is the only move, and now we can already capture the pawn. Black's having 3 moves to capture the pawn, with the queen, or with the bishop. If capture with the pawn, the idea could be to push the pawn and solidifying the setup. But here already a check, another check, and already queen to b3, threatening to play bishop b5 and winning the queen. So a6, and now already bishop c4. The position is already way better for white because black is having too many light square weaknesses, and the knight is also hanging. So after knight f6, bishop g5, white is just too much better because of the activity and black's weak king in the center. So going back, that's why pawn takes is not really a good option. If queen take, we can give a check, capture the pawn, just trade out the queen, develop the bishop, short castle, bishop e3, and white has already completed the development, and white is a pawn up with a winning position. So if black goes for capturing the pawn with the bishop, the best option, we give a check and again capture the pawn. Black has to keep the queens out on the board, or else it's going to be a clean pawn up for white. So knight e7, bishop c4, not allowing black to castle and at the same time developing the pieces naturally. Bishop f5, queen e2, queen d7. The idea is to do a long castle. We play the knight to d2. What's the idea? Long castle, and now we want to play knight to e4. We are not doing first short castle because it just takes one move away from us. So first knight e2, knight e4. Trying to play a bit faster. Our idea is to capture the bishop. So if, for example, if we capture the knight, we can happily capture the bishop, knight to d5, short castle, because knight d5 is kind of a forced move, or else bishop to e6 wins the queen. So knight d5, short castle first, rook e8, queen d4, knight to f6, already bishop g5, and white is already pretty comfortable because of the bishop pair and pawn advantage. So that's why you can't really capture the knight. Bishop c7, keeping the bishop, can lead to knight to c5, and already knight to e6. Forcing, like attacking the rook and the bishop, and kind of forcing black to capture the knight now. Takes, and now simply trade off the queen, and white is just winning after a short castle now, and white is winning. So that's exactly what happens if black captures the knight. If black simply develops, bishop b5, and now bishop d6 because black wants to do short castle. So first knight g4, or else black is fully prepared to capture on e5. So knight g4 now, short castle. We short castle as well. Bishop e7. Now the idea of bishop e7 is that black wants to play d5. So to not allow that move, we first play the move d5 by ourselves, attacking the knight at the same time. So knight takes, and now play knight to e5. Because you can't really play knight to e5 because the e5 square is already covered. Knight e5, we capture the e4 pawn, and after d6, knight to a3, bishop f5, queen d4, bishop f6, queen d1, keeping the queen at a very you can say at a very safe square. And after queen d1, a6, queen e7, it looks like black is having just too much compensation for the pawn, but white is a pawn up. And now after this maneuvering of knight c2, knight d4, attacking the bishop, bishop e3, and you can already sense white has able to recover the pawn, and white is just a clean pawn up with a better position. So this is how you can play if your opponent plays f5. Now discussing what happens if your opponent plays bishop to c5, naturally developing the bishop. We push the pawn to d4, forcing black to capture the pawn, bishop b4 check, knight c3, d5, or else white is going to play g5 and is going to get a completely winning position. d5, we take the pawn, takes, as we cannot capture the queen because the knight is pinned up. So we first play bishop e2, knight to f6, short castle, queen to a5, because now white is kind of prepared to capture the queen. So queen f5, a3, forcing black to capture the knight, takes, and now first of all, if you simply do a short castle now, black can play anything because white is having the bishop pair, hanging pawns, like white can just play the move c4, which is also not bad. You're having a very comfortable center. So after takes, I think black has to go for the bold decision and capture the pawn. But now already bishop d2, bishop c4, threatening rook e1 check and trying to checkmate the black king at the center of the board. So short castle is the only option, but now rook b1, queen into a3 is the only move. But now simply d5 attacking the knight, and now just bishop b4. The queen is trapped and you can't do much. It's completely winning position for white. So that's exactly how you can play if your opponent plays bishop to c5. And now coming to the main move, what happens if black plays knight to f6, attacking the e4 pawn and at the same time developing the knight. After knight f6, we play the move d4, striking in the center. After d4, black is having two options. Black can either go for capturing the d4 pawn or go for capturing the e4 pawn. If knight into e4, we play the move d5, attacking the knight, and now play the move knight into e5. And now, if black plays d6, which is a very natural looking move, it's already a blunder, as after bishop b5 check, it's completely winning. You can't keep the piece on d7 because I can simply checkmate you. So you have to play c6, but now simply takes, and now simply checks. If you take the knight, you are simply losing every particular material and it's completely winning for white. So the only move for black is to play queen b6, attacking the bishop. So basically you can't really capture the knight because queen into b5 is fine. But you play the move knight to d4 check, protecting the bishop and simply giving a check. So after bishop d7, you can already capture the bishop, short castle, and material wise it's a even position, but like material wise white is still a pawn up, but at the same time black is having complete weak king, white is a pawn up, a weak pawn on d6, the position is completely losing for black, and white is completely winning. So that's exactly what happens if black plays d6. Black have to play knight to g6, which makes sense, which is the best move. You are trying to trade off the knight and also trying to open up the bishop. So we trade the knight and now play the move bishop to d3, attacking the knight. The knight goes back to f6 and now we simply play short castle. And now if there are two moves, if black goes for capturing the d5 pawn or black simply develops his pieces with bishop to e7. If knight in d5, we can already give a check and capture the g6 pawn. As after pawn takes, we can already capture the knight and it's completely winning position for white. So black have to move the knight back, and after bishop c2, it's already very comfortable position for white. As after short castle, it can lead to various problems after bishop g5, queen d3, threatening mate in 1. So bishop e7 is the main move, and now simply c4, short castle, knight c3, simply develop your pieces, d6, rook e1, rook e8, h3. Because all your pieces have been developed, so it's a good idea to first play h3, stopping this bishop to g4 idea. Bishop f5, and now you just play a4, trying to grab more space on the queen side. Bishop into d3, queen into d3, and now knight to d7. The idea is to put the bishop at f6, the best square, and put the knight either to c5 or to e5, attacking the queen. So after knight d7, we play the move queen to c2. It is also known as prophylaxis. As we already know, after knight d7, black's idea is to play knight c5 or knight g5, at which the queen is going to be attacked. So it's already a good idea to first move the queen away. Bishop f6, and now just bishop d2, a5, trying to stop white's idea with expanding on the queen side with a5. So a5, and just takes, rook e1, and black plays queen f8. Black's idea is that black wants to trade off the rook. But now already knight b5, a very strong move, exclamation I would say, attacking the pawn. So first of all, you can't push the pawn because after knight c7, rook to c8. You have to keep the rook at the 8th rank, or else you will lose with rook to e8, the queen. So rook c8, and now just bishop into a5, protecting the pawn, protecting the knight, and also capturing the pawn. So b6 just takes. And what's the funny part? White is a piece down, but rook e8 at the same time, at the right time, and white is completely winning. So yeah, that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays c6. If your opponent plays queen to d8, protecting the c7 pawn, just b3, and white's at the very least better because of the open e file, having more space at the center. Knight on b5 is dominantly placed, attacking the c7 pawn. c6 can cause various problems to black in the future, and I guess maybe white can just trade off bishop and try to dominate on the e file, maybe expand on the king side, and slowly after 3 hours of game, you will be able to win the game after grinding down your opponent. So this is how you can play the Ponziani opening. We have successfully covered many variations under the Ponziani opening: f5, bishop c5, and knight to f6. In the upcoming videos, we are also going to look at the main move d5, which is also pretty popular. And yeah, that's it for today. So guys, if you learned anything new today, make sure to like the video, share this video with everyone, and make sure to subscribe to our channel if you are new to our channel. I'm going to come up with these exciting videos like this. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching Oneshot Chess.